Hi, welcome to Programming with Mash. Prepare in advance for your interview with the best possible React Native interview questions and answers. List some benefits of using React Native for building mobile apps. Some benefits of React Native are known for optimal performance. React Native is a real asset when it comes to improving the performances through native control and modules. Can reuse the codes and pre-developed components. One of the biggest benefits that you can gain from React Native is the advantage of code reusability. Large community of developers. The fact that React Native is an open-source JavaScript platform where every developer is free to contribute to the framework and it's easily accessible to all. Advantage of live and hot reloading. If you have a couple of open windows, including that of code and the app screen, you would be able to view the outcome instantly after making changes in the code. Offers simple user interface. React Native offers a more responsive UI designs and reduces the loading time as well. Support for third-party plugins. The React Native also renders its support for the third-party plugins, offering a couple of options that include native modules and JavaScript modules. Modular architecture. The modular programming helps to segregate the program functions into various different free and interchangeable blocks known as modules, providing handy solutions and libraries. React Native gives you the advantage of having the best list of ready-made solutions and libraries to simplify the task of mobile app development. What is a hybrid app? Hybrid apps combine both web applications created for web browser and native applications that are designed for a particular platform and have to be installed on a device. What differs hybrid apps from web apps? It runs as a real app, not as a web page. It can work offline. Integration with the file system of a device. Hybrid mobile apps are usually developed using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then wrapped in native apps with the help of special platforms. The disadvantage of hybrid apps is that their speed depends on the speed of the browser. Thus, hybrid mobile apps are usually slower than native apps. There are two ways of building hybrid mobile apps: web view wrapped in a native app and compiled into native app. What are native apps? Native applications are built for specific platforms and are written in language that the platform accepts. For example, Swift and Objective-C for native iOS apps, and Java or Kotlin for native Android apps. Native apps are also built using the specific integrated development environment (IDE) for the selected operating systems. The most known IDEs in mobile development are Xcode for iOS development that only works on macOS, and Android Studio for Android development works on Windows, Mac, Linux, and Chrome OS. Native apps work with the device's OS in ways that enable them to perform faster and more flexibly than alternative application types. These apps can directly access the hardware of the device, such as the GPS, camera, microphone, etc. So they are faster in execution, which ultimately results in better user experience. What is React Native? React Native is a mobile app development framework that enables the development of multi-platform Android and iOS apps using native UI elements. React Native developed and presented to the world by Facebook in 2015. It works just like React, but allows you to build apps for both mobile and desktop. The beauty of it is that you can code in JavaScript without having to master any specific coding language a platform might require, like Java, Swift, or Objective-C. It's based on the JavaScript core runtime and Babel transformers. With this setup, React Native supports new JavaScript, ES6+ features, e.g. arrow functions, async await, etc. React Native is focused on building a great user experience for mobile devices, which makes it a suitable option for apps that require high responsiveness and intuitive use. What is Virtual DOM? The Virtual DOM or VDOM is a programming concept where an ideal or virtual representation of a UI is kept in memory and synced with the real DOM by a library such as React DOM. The process is called reconciliation. In React, for every DOM object, there is a corresponding virtual DOM object. A virtual DOM object is a representation of a DOM object, like a lightweight copy. A virtual DOM object has the same properties as a real DOM object, but it lacks the real thing's power to directly change what's on the screen. Manipulating the DOM is slow. Manipulating the virtual DOM is much faster, because nothing gets drawn on a screen. Think of manipulating a virtual DOM as editing a blueprint, as opposed to moving rooms in actual house. When you render a JSX element, every single virtual DOM object gets updated. How is React Native different from React.js? React.js can be described as a base derivative of React DOM for the web platform, while React Native is a base derivative in itself, which means that the syntax and workflow remain the same, but components alter. React.js eventually is a JavaScript library which enables the programmer to create an engaging and high-performing UI layer, while React Native is an entire framework for building cross-platform apps, be it web, iOS, or Android. In React.js, Virtual DOM is used to render browser code in React.js, while in React Native, native APIs are used to render components in mobile. The apps developed with React.js renders HTML in UI, while React Native uses JSX for rendering UI, which is nothing but JavaScript. CSS is used for creating styling in React.js, while a style sheet is used for styling in React Native. What are props in React Native? Most components can be customized when they are created with different parameters. These created parameters are called props, short for properties. For example, one basic React Native component is the image. When you create an image, you can use a prop named source to control what image it shows. Your own components can also use props. This lets you make a single component that is used in many different places in your app with a slightly different properties in each place by referring to props in your render function. What are the advantages of native apps over hybrid apps and web apps? Smooth work, fast operating speed, and flawless performance. The native versus hybrid app is built for a specific OS and takes full advantage of the processing speed of the device. Great design and user experience possibilities. For instance, the implementation of sophisticated UX, UI design, and animation. Native app UI allows users to understand navigation within the app more quickly. Good integration with the hardware of the device, e.g. camera, GPS, phone, touchscreen. Easy to launch in the App Store. When it comes to the question of native versus hybrid app or a mobile web app, native applications follow the OS guidelines completely. Better security and reliability. Apps developed natively are checked and approved by the App Store. Easy to implement new sophisticated features that the market demands, AI, VR, AR, IoT, etc. in native versus hybrid app. SDK for developers. It provides half-ready, regularly updated solutions and libraries that interact properly with a given operating system. What happens when you call setState? The first thing React will do when setState is called is merge the object you passed into setState into the current state of the component. This will kick off a process called reconciliation. The end goal of reconciliation is to, in the most efficient way possible, update the UI based on this new state. To do this, React will construct a new tree of React elements, which you can think of as an object representation of your UI. Once it has this tree, in order to figure out how the UI should change in response to the new state, React will diff this new tree against the previous element tree.
By doing this, React will then know the exact change will occur. And by knowing exactly what change occurred, we'll able to minimize its footprint on the UI by only making updates where absolutely necessary. What is Flux? Flux is an architecture that Facebook uses internally when working with React. It is not a framework or a library. It is simply a new kind of architecture that complements React and the concept of unidirectional data flow. A typical Flux architecture will leverage this dispatcher library along with Node.js's event emitter module in order to set up an event system that helps manage an application's state. What is JSX? JSX is an XML, HTML-like syntax used by React that extends ECMAScript so that XML, HTML-like text can coexist with JavaScript React code. The syntax is intended to be used by preprocessors, i.e. transpilers like Babel, to transform HTML-like text found in JavaScript files into standard JavaScript objects that a JavaScript engine will parse. For example, the text inside view tag return as JavaScript function to the render function. What is the difference between a state and props? The state is a data structure that starts with the default value when a component mounts. It may be mutated across time, mostly as a result of user events. Props are a component's configuration. They are received from above and immutable as far as the component receiving them is concerned. A component cannot change its props, but it is responsible for putting together the props of its child components. Props do not have to just be data. Callback functions may be passed in as props. What is the point of Redux? Redux is used mostly for application state management. To summarize it, Redux maintains the state of an entire application in a single immutable state tree which can't be changed directly. When something changes, a new object is created using actions and reducers. When would you use SQL view over flatlist or vice versa? If you need to render a list of similar items from an array or the data is very big, use flatlist. If you need to render generic content in a SQL-level container and the data is small, use SQL view. Explain the use of Flexbox in React Native. To accommodate different screen sizes, React Native offers Flexbox support. To achieve the desired layout, Flexbox offers three main properties: flex direction, justify content, and align items. Flexbox works the same way in React Native as it does in CSS on the web with a few exceptions. The defaults are different, with flex direction defaulting to column instead of row, and the flex parameter only supporting a single number.
How are props and state different? Props are immutable and are set by the parent, and they are fixed throughout the lifetime of a component. State is mutable. This means that a state can be updated in the future while props can't. Props used for passing data and settings through the component tree. State used for restoring simple view state like whether or not drop-down options are visible. Props are passed from parent to child. It's a unidirectional flow and read-only for child component. State is managed by a component on its own. It's reusable, private to the component, and modifiable. How do we re-render a flat list? By passing extra data to flat list, we make sure flat list will re-render itself when its value changes. Without setting this prop, flat list wouldn't know it needs to re-render any items, because it's also a pure component and the prop comparison will not show any changes. How do you style a component in React Native? With React Native, you style your application using JavaScript. All of the core components accept a prop named style. The style names and values usually match how CSS works on the web, except names are written using camel casing. For example, background color rather than background dash color. You can also pass an array of styles. The last style in the array has precedence, so you can use these to inherit styles. As a component grows in complexity, it's often cleaner to use a style sheet to define several styles in one place. How is Flexbox different in React Native and browser? Flexbox works the same way in React Native as it does in CSS on the web, with a few exceptions. The defaults are different, with flex direction defaulting to column instead of row, and the flex parameter only supporting a single number. How to fetch data from local JSON file on React Native? You can use require like this, or you can import directly in ES6 like this, and then access data like a normal JS object. What are React hooks? Hooks are a new addition in React 16.8. They let you use a state and other React features without writing a class. With hooks, you can extract a stateful logic from a component, so it can be tested independently and reused. Hooks allow you to reuse stateful logic without changing your component hierarchy. This makes it easy to share hooks among many components or with the community. What are advantages of using React hooks? Primarily, hooks in general enable the extraction and reuse of stateful logic that is common across multiple components without the burden of higher order components or render props. Hooks allow to easily manipulate the state of our functional component without needing to convert them into class components. Hooks don't work inside classes because they let you use React without classes. By using them, we can totally avoid using lifecycle methods, such as component did mount, component did update, component will unmount. Instead, we will use built-in hooks like useEffect. What is context in React? In a typical React Native application, data is passed from parent to child via props, but such usage can be cumbersome for certain types of props, for example local preference, that are required by many components within an application. Context provides a way to share values like these between components without having to explicitly passing a prop through every level of the tree. What is Vue and how important is it? Vue is the most fundamental component for building a UI in React Native. Vue is a container that supports layout with Flexbox, style, some touch handling, and accessibility controls. Vue maps directly to the native Vue equivalent on whatever platform React Native is running on, whether that is a UI view, div tag, Android.Vue, etc. Vue is designed to be nested inside other views and can have 0 to many children of any type. What is the use of a scroll view component? The scroll view is a generic scrolling container that can contain multiple components and views. The scrollable items need not be homogeneous, and you can scroll both vertically and horizontally by setting a horizontal property. Scroll view renders all its React child components at once, but this has a performance downside. Describe Flux versus Redux architecture. The Flux architecture is based on the following components. Action enables data passing to the dispatcher. Dispatcher coordinates actions and updates to stores. Store or stores serves as a container for the app state and logic. View displays the model in the UI in the context of React components. Redux is a library which implements the idea of Flux but in quite a different way. Redux architecture introduces new components like reducer, logic that decides how your data changes exist in pure functions. Centralized store holds a state object that denotes the state of the entire app. What does stylesheet.create do, and what are refs in React Native? The stylesheet.create function in React Native is used for the following. It validates the keys and registers them to React. It creates a stylesheet style reference from the specified object. It allows you to send the style only once through the bridge while referring to all subsequent users through ID. Refs is short form for reference and used to access underlying DOM nodes or React elements within a React component.
What is async storage? How and when do you use it? Async storage is a simple, asynchronous, unencrypted by default module that allows you to persist data offline in React Native apps. The persistence of data is done in a key-value storage system. There are numerous scenarios where this module can be beneficial. Persisting data in a mobile app has benefits, such as when the user restarts the app, the data or the setting variables being available to the user in the state they left before closing the app. For example, with this code, we save the user's age with the identifier of a storage key. And with this code, we retrieve the user's age with that key. We use async storage when persisting non-sensitive data across app runs, persisting Redux state, persisting GraphQL state, storing global app-wide variables. And we don't use it for token storage and the secrets. What are the differences between class and functional component? The essential differences between the class component and functional component are syntax. The declaration of both components is different. A functional component takes props and returns React element, whereas the class components require to extend from React. State. The class component has a state, while the functional component is stateless. Of course, the functional component can use the state hook. Lifecycle. The class component has a lifecycle, while the functional component doesn't have a lifecycle. Why should we use TypeScript in React Native? With TypeScript, it's easy to define prop types, making the code much easier to read and use. And this will accompany by IntelliSense support plus static type checking. When a developer is working on a project and wants to maintain the project for a long period of time, then the user should need TypeScript. In order to use the TypeScript, users should need to configure the TypeScript, because it gives an option to configure the compiler. Users can configure the TypeScript as per their requirements and can effectively prioritize the type of errors. What is the use of the arrow function? The use of arrow functions in React Native is to help reduce your application's memory consumption. It's done by reducing the CPU time required to iterate the overloops to generate the components necessary for your lists. Here's an example of arrow function in render. What is the difference between Shadow DOM and Virtual DOM? Shadow DOM creates small pieces of the DOM object, which has its own isolated scope as they represent. It's a tool that is used in building the apps and websites that are based on components. It comes in small pieces and doesn't represent the whole document object model. Virtual DOM creates a copy of the whole DOM object. It's a concept of DOM which is being used by React.js. It's done to improve the performance of the UI libraries. How to call web service in React Native? React Native provides the Fetch API for networking needs. To fetch content from an arbitrary URL, we can pass the URL to fetch. Here's an example to call a web service to React Native with fetch. Networking is an inherently asynchronous operation. Fetch methods will return a promise that makes it straightforward to write code that works in an asynchronous manner. What are animations in React Native? The animation is a method in which images are manipulated to appear as moving objects. React Native animations allow you to add extra effects, which provide great user experience in the app. We can use it with React Native API, animated.parallel, animated.decay, and animated.stagger. React Native has two types of animation, which are given below. Animated. This API is used to control specific values. It has a start and stops methods for controlling the time-based animation execution. Layout animated. This API is used to animate the global layout transactions. Describe timers in React Native application. Set timeout, clear timeout. There may be business requirements to execute a certain piece of code after waiting for some time duration or after a delay. Set timeout can be used in such cases. Clear timeout is simply used to clear the timer that is started. Set interval, clear interval. Set interval is a method that calls a function or runs some code after a specific intervals of time as specified through the second parameter. A function or block of code that is bound to an interval executes until it's stopped. To stop an interval, we can use the clear interval method. Set immediate, clear immediate. Calling the function or execution as soon as possible. This code displays the alert dialog immediately. Clear immediate is used for canceling the immediate actions that were set by set immediate.
How does React Native achieve native performance for some of its animations? Certain animation types, like animation.timing and animation.spring, can be serialized and sent across the asynchronous bridge before they are executed. This allows the runtime to defer the actual drawing of the animation entirely to the native side instead of trying to send positional values across the bridge as each frame is rendered. This doesn't work with animations that are not computable ahead of time. For example, this will serialize the operation and send it to the native side before starting it. What is Yoga in React Native? Yoga is a cross-platform layout engine written in C which implements Flexbox through bindings to the native views, Java Android views, or Objective-C iOS UI kit. All the layout calculations of the various views, texts, and images in React Native are done through Yoga. This is basically the last step before our views get displayed on the screen. Does React Native have a virtual DOM? Yes, React Native, like the virtual DOM in React.js, renders the UI. React Native components map the actual real native iOS or Android UI components that get rendered on the app. Means React Native uses native API for the rendering of components on mobile. React Native uses a shadow thread that performs layout calculation using Yoga. In case of any change in the component state, it will calculate the changes in the background using shadow thread, then update the UI threads. What are controlled and uncontrolled components in React Native? A controlled component is one that is bound to a value, and the changes inside it will be handled in code by using event-based callbacks. It doesn't maintain its internal state. Data is controlled by the parent component. It accepts the current value as a prop, has much efficient control over the form elements and data. Uncontrolled component is similar to the traditional HTML form inputs, but here the form data is handled by the DOM itself. It maintains its internal states. Here the data is controlled by the DOM itself. ref is used for their current values. Has less control over the form elements and the data. What is the use of Firebase in React Native? Firebase is a mobile platform that helps you quickly develop high-quality apps, grow your user base, and earn more money. This is a tool and infrastructure that users need to build better apps and grow a successful business. In addition, Firebase is made up of a complementary feature that users can mix and match to fit your needs. There are total key features of Firebase, namely authentication, real-time database, cloud messaging, crash reporting, and analytics. How React Native handles different screen sizes? React Native provides many ways to handle screen sizes. Flexbox. It's used to provide a consistent layout on different screen sizes. It has three main properties: flex direction, justify content, align items. Pixel ratio. It is used to get access to the device pixel density by using the pixel ratio class. We will get a higher resolution image if we are on a high pixel density device. Dimensions. It is used to handle different screen sizes and style the page precisely. It needs to write the code only once for working on any device. Aspect ratio. It is used to set the height or vice versa. The aspect ratio is present only in React Native, not a CSS standard. Scroll view. It is a scrolling container which contains multiple components and view. The scrollable items can be scrolled both vertically and horizontally. What is Interaction Manager and why is it important? Interaction Manager allows long-running work to be scheduled after any interactions animations have completed. In particular, this allows JavaScript animations to run smoothly. Applications can schedule tasks to run after interactions with the following. It is important because it creates an interaction handle on animation start and clearing it upon completion in applications to register animations. What is Gesture Responder System in React Native? Gesture Responder System is a system that manages the lifecycle of the applications which are built in React Native framework. The applications automatically determine the intention of the users through touch. For example, the application determines a slide on the widget, touches scrolling, or tapping. The Gesture Responder System allows the components to negotiate these touch interactions without integrating any sort of knowledge regarding their parent component and child component. React Native Gesture Responder System is the most powerful system as it uses a standard library to detect gestures such as scroll distance, single tap, double tap, single tap confirmed, and pinch distance. Native apps that feel smooth often incorporate lots of little animations for state change and transitions. How would you implement these behaviors? React Native comes with the Animated API built-in. This API is declarative. We define specific animations using animated.timing, animated.spring, etc., and provide the exact parameters needed for the animation to run. This technique falls apart when we need lots of subtle and delicate animations on the fly. It's not performant and maintaining all that code would be a nightmare. Instead, we look to the Layout Animation module, which is an interpolative API. We can invoke predefined layout animations or define our own. Layout animation watches changes in the positions of elements between cycles of the render loop and computes the positional differences between elements at different cycles. Then it interpolates those changes and produces a smooth, natively driven animation. Are compiled to JS libraries like TypeScript or ClojuraScript compatible with React Native? Why or why not? Languages that compile to JavaScript are generally compatible with React Native. React Native uses Babel to transform JavaScript into a form that is consumable by the native OS's JavaScript runtime using the React Native Babel plugin. As long as Babel can compile your JavaScript and your code doesn't rely on web or Node.js specific dependencies, it will run in React Native. Well, I hope you have a successful interview. In addition, you can use the React Native tutorial series on the channel to improve your technical skills.